Alright, so as you all know, I'm a very busy man, so I only have time to take questions from one reporter today, you. Thank you, President Simo. Many are concerned about the disastrous effects of climate change. Would you mind— Oh my god, you and climate change. It's called the weather, dummy. Of course the climate is changing. With all due respect, sir, this goes far beyond the implications of weather. Yesterday, a snowman came to life Frosty style and asked us to repent for our sins against Mother Nature. Alright, if you're so concerned about the weather, how about this? We'll give him a link monster. Sir, I don't think you— A link monster and a field spell? Oh. Yeah, okay. Alright, let's get back to what's important. According to this document, line go up.
Good afternoon, Jank enthusiasts. I'm MBT, and this is 10-Minute Testing. I find it extremely funny that Konami hosted a big bracket to decide which of a series of fan-favorite archetypes would get legacy support, and then 10,000 years later they finally revealed the Insector card, and in that time, about half of the other archetypes on the list got support that's genuinely better than the Insector card. Of those, I am happy to say the Weathery was one, so let's see what Konami built for these losers.
No.
So here's the list. Now keep in mind that this is still very much a proof of concept. As the meta changes, I expect this will change as well. As always, I'll give you a background about the archetype, a little bit of a discussion about what I hope the deck can do, and of course the card by card. But first, this video is sponsored by Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro Deck. Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro Deck is the pack opening website that everyone's using to host their own progression series, but you might have also missed it's got a deck builder, a card database, and a wealth of strategy articles. I personally use it to post the Chalice Line monthly deck breakdowns. Give it a look at www.ygoprodeck.com. Now let's whinge about Weathery. Weathery is an archetype released in Spirit Warriors in 2017, which is now a half-decade old? Jesus. Anyway, this Ruling's Nightmare made real is bifurcated into two parts, a series of continuous spells and traps that give the monsters and their adjacent columns effects, and a series of monsters that finds those spells and traps. These spells and traps range from completely unplayable, like Sunny Canvas, a card that I literally cannot explain, to busted out the ass, like Snowy Canvas, a card that makes your Weatherys Stratoses. While this deck has enjoyed smatterings of rogue playability, its glacially slow game plan and completely telegraphed lines have kept it out of serious metagame contention everywhere but Duel Links. But the climate is now changing for the Weatherys, and unlike our climate, it's changing for the better. In the 5 years since Spirit Warriors, the Weathers have received two series of legacy support. The first, the Weathery Rainbow Canvas, allows you to get more monsters into rotation, one of Weather's historic weaknesses. The second, releasing in Dimension Force, includes one of the weirdest cards I've ever read, the Weather Forecast. This field spell activates a Weather spell trap from your deck on activation, lets you normal summon an additional Weather monster per turn, and permits you to link summon using spells and traps you control. Like this archetype wasn't enough of a Ruling's headache already. This resolves the second of the Weather Painter's problems, the speed at which they win the game. If you've got at least one painter returning on your turn, you can effortlessly cycle through enough spells and traps to summon their often unused link monster, the Weather Painter Rainbow. This card turns the weather monsters it points to into omni-negates, and if you link summon her with a cloud on the field, you'll just reset all the spells anyway. We're playing a list designed to do just that. Play a slow, methodical control game turn 1, and then lean into near infinite negates on turn 2. Because the weather monsters banish themselves for cost, we can also make use of some Ritual Beast-style synergies with Nibiru and Torrential Tribute for one-sided board clears even after we've set up. And because we can so easily take advantage of a stalled turn, we can utilize the synergy between Rainy Canvas and Anti-Spell Fragrance to permanently keep our opponents off of the equalizers that would otherwise break our boards. So with that, let's get into the card by card. First up, we have the Weather Painter Snow, the best card in the archetype. When this card is normal summoned, you can put a Weather spell trap from your deck face up in your spell and trap zone. This usually means that you can set a Weather Snowy Canvas and use the banish effect to then search a copy of the Weather Forecast, provided you have another weather. Speaking of weathers, we've got the Weather Painter Thunder. This card allows you to send a face-up continuous spell trap you control to the graveyard to tag into a Weather spell trap from your deck face up in your spell and trap card zone. It combos nicely with our next card, the Weather Painter Cloud, which, if another face up the weather card you control control, including monsters, is sent to the graveyard, you can target up to 2 weather spell traps in your graveyard and put them face up in your spell and trap card zone. Finally, we have 1 copy of the Weather Painter Aura. This is a fantastic search off of the rainbowy canvas. It, like Snow, puts a weather spell trap from your hand, deck, or graveyard into your face up spell and trap card zone on normal summon, but more importantly, prevents your weather spell traps from being destroyed or targeted by your opponent's card effects. After that, we've got some hand traps, 3 copies of Nibiru, 3 copies of Ash Blossom, and Joyous Spring. Next are the spells. We've got 1 Terraforming, searching 3 copies of the Weather Forecast, critical to most of your combo setups, and also just getting enough weathers into rotation to survive an onslaught from your opponent. 3 Weather Snowy Canvas. This card is not only a fantastic draw because you can then search whatever you want, it's also a great way to dodge hand traps. You can set it and then banish the monster whose effect you are activating in response to something like an infinite impermanence or an effect veiler. We're also playing 1 Weather Rainy Canvas, which allows you to bounce back row. This is killer against decks like Eldritch, but also against decks that are locked out of their spell cards because of anti-spell. Finally, we've got 3 copies of Pot of Prosperity. For traps, we're on double Thundery Canvas. I could maybe shave this down to 1. It's just good to have 2 in rotation and threaten your opponent's monsters with your own. It turns your weather monsters into damage step activating bounce spells. And we've got a Weathery Rainbow Canvas as well. This card allows you to summon any weather monster from your deck. It might seem like you're accomplishing nothing, but because you'll be summoning back the one that you banished to activate the effect, you'll get at least 1 additional monster on your next turn. Finally, we've got 3 Infip, 3 Torrential, 3 ASF, and 1 Skill Drain. Because they all banish for cost, it doesn't matter. In the extra, we've got 2 Entis for IDS. We've got Double Azus, Downward Magician, Breaksword, Fortune Tune, Access Code Talker, Double Rainbow, Double Moonbow. This is another new card, but it doesn't really accomplish as much for the deck as the field spell does. If it's link summoned, you can special summon a banished weather monster, and if it's destroyed, you can special a rainbow from your extra deck. And the weather effect monsters it points to gain the following effect. You can banish it, then banish the monsters your opponent controls that you target. It's good, but not as good as Rainbowy. Mostly, it's just used for OTKs, banishing a high attack monster like Thundery by sending a bunch of spell traps to the graveyard. After that, we've got a Unicorn, a Phoenix, and a Light and Earth Charmer. In the side deck, we've got Triple Dimension Shifter. This deck has historically played this card, but now, with the way Cloudy interacts with the rest of the deck and how critical it is for most of your setup plays, it's actually not as fantastic as it used to be. Moreover, there are some decks that just don't care about this anymore. Triple Droll and Lockbird, Triple Dark Ruler No More, Triple Evenly Matched, and Triple Dogmatica Punishment for when you're on the play. So, I'm excited to take this out for a spin. Let's see how it does in the games. Our first match is up against Madolche, and to the individual who keeps pledging to Simo asking me to play this deck, keep dreaming. We're going first, and this is a pretty good hand. We're going to begin with a copy of Snowy Canvas. That way, when we activate the effect of the Weather Painter Snow and our opponent responds with a Psy-Frame Gear Gamma, we can tag out the snow, and at least we get to keep it for the next turn. It doesn't resolve, but we do get to get the Weather Forecast here, which is probably good enough. We're going to set that Weather Forecast and use its effect to get a copy of the Weather Rainbowy Canvas, setting 2 and passing back to our opponent. In standby, we're going to bring back this copy of Weather Painter Snow and pass back to our opponent, who's going to begin with a copy of Betetting Cesseur. We're going to fire the Infinite Impermanence here, making them commit to more stuff on field. I want their normal out of the way, and the Angeli is that. They're going to go for Hootcake, and here we're going to activate Snow as Chainlink 1 and Torrential as Chainlink 2, so we can wipe the board and get a copy of Cloud to our side of the field as well. They're going to trigger both the graveyard effects of their Madolches because they don't have like a ticket or anything. They'll go for a Pot of Prosperity afterwards. Here they're just looking for the double summon, and unfortunately for them, they do not find it. They do find the trap, so they will take the Promenade, set it and this copy of the Crossout Designator that is going to accomplish literally nothing in pass turn. And end step, we'll search a card, and this should be the end of the game. We'll activate the effect of Cloud here, bringing it back to the field, and the effect of Snow. They're going to go ahead and negate the effect of our field spell, but unfortunately for them, we can just Snowy Canvas to get another copy of the field spell. We'll set the field spell here. We're going to set a copy of Rain. We're going to normal summon a copy of Snow. That's all that we needed. We'll go for the Snow to bounce the back row before we even commit, and then we're going to link 3 of those away for a copy of Rainbow. We'll trigger the effect of the Cloud to get 2 cards back to our side of the field and get in for 39, I believe, but it doesn't really matter because now we have access to 3 negates plus all of our back row. We're going to bring back Snow. We are going to bring back Snow, and our opponent's going to commit to some more cards on field. They'll begin with a copy of Small World. We'll go ahead and negate that. Afterwards, we're going to go for a copy of Angeli. They're going to activate that effect, and we'll negate that. They cross out here, and I'm like, there's no way you have the Weather Painter Snow in your deck, and it turns out they don't. After that, it's just going to be a hop, skip, and a jump to lethal. From here, we bring back both of our Snows in the standby phase. We have a million negates, even if they have something like a Nibiru, but let's keep it simple. We'll just tribute summon this Aurora and go to the battle phase, dealing a lethal amount of damage. Our second match is up against Adventurer PK, and two things about this deck. Firstly, this is a strategy you're all going to have to get really familiar with really quick. And secondly, I make a pretty critical error here. You can see I go for the anti-spell fragrance line, expecting, since it has so many Adventurer cards in it, we might be able to cut them off a significant amount of their game plan. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work out, so we go for the Rainy over something like maybe a Rainbowy instead. We're going to get a copy of anti-spell fragrance flipped up, and it does resolve. I'm feeling pretty good, and then they start with the comparatively weak starter. I'm feeling pretty good about Tornscale, Pitch Tornscale, and then they reveal their entire hand as extenders. I don't know if I can contend with that. So they're going to go for a copy of Cherubini. Unfortunately, I don't really have any more interaction for the rest of the turn. We get to keep them off the Sanctuary, but they're still going to be able to go for the Tornscale here and make a copy of Levier. They're going to use Levier to bring back Aquamancer, and then afterwards they can make a copy of Phoenix, popping what they think is the last piece of interaction, but unfortunately it's just a Thundery Canvas. We can use Cloud to reset that, but this is probably all she wrote. They're going to go for a Nightmare Unicorn in order to spin back the ASF, then go for the Fogblade to bring back this copy of Tornscale. From here, they can summon the Stained Greaves from hand and then activate Shade Brigandine as well. They have a Link Spider and extra, and they'll go into an access code talker. Now, this isn't lethal, and I do have lethal if they pass back to me, but unfortunately, they do have a couple more tricks up their sleeve, and one of them is the fact that every deck under the sun right now is playing DPE. They'll go for Verte Anaconda, send a copy of Fusion Destiny, get themselves a copy of DPE, proceed to the battle phase, and get in for, I believe, 200 or 300 over lethal. Sad. So it's time for game 3, and you know what that means, a best of 3 versus meta. Our opponent's playing Sword Soul Tenyi, and as much as I want to whine about how we totally would have won this one if we won the die roll, this is not a good hand. We don't even have a normal summon. Our opponent's going to begin with a copy of Ashana. They're going to summon it to their side of the field and then tag out for a Monk, then activate the effect of the Adhara in hand, and use Ashana's effect in order to summon a Vishada. 7+1 is 8. They'll make a Baxia and tag the Monk out for the Adhara. Then 8+1 is 9. They'll make Chaofeng, cutting us off of Nibiru before they even commit to a Sword Soul monster. They're going to go for Moye here, activate the effect of Moye for a token, and then Adhara in order to bring back the Ashana and make themselves a copy of Chisao. They're going to trigger the effect of the Chisao and the Moye in sequence, drawing a Sethana. Wow, that's interesting. Before firing off an Emergence for a Protoss. Afterwards, they'll fire off a Pot of Desires, and though they do find the long one, they elect to not go for it. They're just going to use the Protoss calling Dark, Dark Lock, Light Lock, and a negation plus an infip. Nibiru 6th card, not like we would have been able to activate it through the Chaofeng anyway. We don't even have a normal, so we're just going to set our hand and concede. So it's time for game 2, and this is a much better hand. We have a normal summon, our opponent doesn't have any hand traps, and we have anti-spell fragrance versus a 4-spell open. We're going to begin with a copy of Pot of Prosperity, finding off the top. Ooh. So this is weird, but I'm actually going to take the Canvas here to potentially dodge an Infinite Impermanence. We'll activate the Canvas, normal summon a copy of Cloud, and then use Cloud's effect in order to go fishing for the Field Spell. We'll activate the Field Spell, get ourselves a copy of Rainy, tunneling into the ASF line and passing back to our opponent. Our opponent draws for turn, we're going to fire the ASF. They have the Cosmic, but I can't be too mad because they have another out to it in the form of Vishada. We're going to bring back the Cloud, they're going to infip to prompt it early. We're going to go ahead and search ourselves a copy of Snowy, and then they Vishada our last piece of interaction, the Infinite Impermanence. Again, I want to be mad about this. It seems like a 50-50 they won blind, but because I summoned Snow to the second zone, they have a read that this set card is a Canvas. And they're right. They're going to tuck it with the Baxia. They are now just all the way through. They're going to activate the effect of Baxia, bringing back the Moye. They'll trigger the effect of the Moye, revealing the Sword Soul in hand, and then go into a Chisao. They'll trigger the Chisao and the Moye, and I believe this is just lethal. They're going to get a Long Wong to hand. They'll activate Long Wong, pitching the Reborn, and go into a Baroness. With the 1200 damage, this is far more than lethal. They'll proceed to the battle phase, take us out, and kick us back to the Rogues Gallery. So we're back with the deck, and wow, not a particularly good showing. It seems more radical action will be necessary to prevent climate catastrophe. Let's do the pros and cons. First, the pros. 1. It's very capable. Its rainbow setup is actually pretty difficult for any deck to deal with, and it puts up enough advantage turn 1 that you usually make it there. 2, it's got a ton of neat little synergies. The Spell Smell thing, the Nibiru thing, the Torrential thing, the way you can activate a Canvas before committing to a normal to dodge a negation hand trap, they're all tricky, and they can trip up unaware opponents. And 3, there are some matchups, historically Thunder Dragon was one for example, where cards like Thundery Canvas are literally an auto-win. And the cons. 1, it bricks. Sort of like how Cosmo needed to find exactly a ship and a pilot, you absolutely must find a painter and a canvas, or Snowy exactly, or you are screwed. I've been considering playing pre-res map in order to get there, but the deck folds so incredibly easily to aggro that I don't want to gauge myself into a loss. 2, its first turn boards are not interactive. They're great at protecting your own cards and getting your own linear strategy online, but they give almost no respect whatsoever to your opponent's game plan. No negates, no pops, and a lot of decks can use that to access their extremely high ceiling and blow you out. And 3, it's probably not the right time for Spell Smell. There are so many decks that can play without spells, and so many that access a pop or a bounce before committing, that building around that synergy felt like a mistake. All in all, kind of a disappointment. I was hoping this would be stronger, but it looks like other decks have spent the last 5 years getting a lot better than Weather did.